right, so today we're talking about two teams going into free agency with young franchise quarterbacks in place, a lot of young pieces in place, a lot of money to spend, but most of all, some big expectations going into next year. And they're really easy to talk about because they're our two favorite teams. Your Houston Texans, my Indianapolis Colts. Going to talk about maybe some things that, as fans, we feel like we know our teams the best. Obviously, we're not in the GM seat, but some team needs and where these teams should be finally spending. It feels like for years now, the Colts and Texans both have not spent any money in free agency. They may have had it and just kind of kept kicking the can down the road. Now it feels like, I know you feel the same way, that it's time to spend for both these teams.
Yeah, I think we're at a breaking point for the Texans. I mean, I think the unfortunate thing is we didn't have a bunch of carryover from last year because we were spending, but we were spending wrong. I mean, we just put 10 million on Robert Woods and 10 million on Jimmy Ward, two players that are pretty good cut candidates this year, and just kind of a waste of cap space. I mean, Woods really I'm sure he might have been good in the locker room as a veteran presence for the young wide receivers, but outside of that, I mean, I saw no effect on the field. Nothing wowed me on the field. But yeah, I mean, we now, after the Schultz signing, after the Fairbairn signing, Texans have 53 million. How much do you guys have? Like 60?
Yeah, we had the Pittman
Oh, that's right. I
franchise
forgot about
tag.
Pittman's tag.
Yeah, the tag kicked in, so we're at around 49 million. And there's some stuff they can do. You can restructure franchise tags, which sounds weird, but you can kind of delay money if you want to, so they can free up a little bit of space. But I'm treating it as if we're around that 50 million number. And you mentioned Woods and Jimmy Ward as cut candidates. Do you have anybody else that you're thinking the Texans maybe should cut ties with before free up some money?
There's a lot of guys that are cut candidates this year. I know a lot of people. The biggest ones for us, easiest ones for us: Woods, Jimmy Ward, MJ Stewart, and then I believe it's somebody think. I'm looking here. I think it's like Jesse Matthews. I mean,
Okay.
none of these guys are crazy good. I think for me, I would only cut Woods. I think Jimmy Ward still has something left in the tank. He had a lot of injuries last year, so he wasn't able to live up to expectations. But he's a veteran presence. He's still got something left in the tank. He's still worthwhile to keep on board. I'd love to see us keep him. MJ Stewart's phenomenal on special teams. Same with Jesse Matthews. Really, they're what kept that unit like a top 5 unit in the NFL last year. So I don't want to see us cut them, even though that would save us another like $4 million. I don't see a real need to get another 4 million when we've got 53 if we spend it wisely. So
Yeah. No, I hear you. I've got one candidate for my Colts, and everybody likes to talk with the Colts about their tight end room, and now there's 5 of them on roster last year. Jelani Woods obviously got hurt, but you assume that he's coming back. Andrew Ogletree had that domestic violence case in December.
yep.
It came out recently that he's been acquitted in court of that. So the NFL is still obviously going to do their investigation, and if they find anything, obviously Andrew Ogletree should be held accountable for something like that. But cleared in court, moving on to the NFL, usually the NFL will follow suit if a court of law lets him off. So expecting Ogletree to possibly be back in the mix. Kylan Granson is still there, and Chris Ballard harps on what Will Mallory did last year and how they can use him. So that leaves one odd man out. To me, it's Mo Alley Cox, kind of a victim at this point of age and a young tight end room. He's 31 years old, and you probably did not know this. He is the 19th biggest tight end cap hit. And tight ends don't get paid a lot,
That's insane.
but to be 19, he's not the 19th best tight end in the league. He's at this point kind of a rotational piece. And he did great things for the Colts, came out of VCU as a basketball player, has been here for a while now, got paid by the Colts, obviously, but cutting him this year saved $6 million. And I think that
Oh
could
yeah.
be placed elsewhere for us. So Mo Alley, unfortunately, in my offseason, is cut.
Yeah, I think that's a solid cut if it saves you $6 million. I mean, I like Mo Ali Cox. He makes some good catches, some clutch catches, but in the same end, you guys have the Raz tight end room. I mean,
Oh yeah,
Woods, Mallory, they're both really good. Granson's solid. I don't know much about Alec Ogletree, I'll be honest, but just those first three alone, I mean, that's a pretty solid tight end room, and definitely at some point, Mo Ali Cox is going to be odd man out. So if it stays at $6 million this year, might as well.
yeah, yeah. I think so too.
Um, what? Let's go with this. What are your free agent targets? Your favorite free agent targets for the Colts?
So I've split it into two. Obviously, you got to worry about re-signing first, and the way the NFL is moving now. Maybe I'll get on the soapbox a little bit about free agency before I start. I think that free agency, some people can think like teams win free agency and teams get significantly better through free agency. Um, I treat it as kind of just a supplementary period. You're filling gaps on your roster. I don't think you should expect anybody that you sign from another team to be a franchise changing player, a franchise player. Um, I think that if a team is willing to let a player walk because they don't think they're worth market value, and that team knows more than whatever team is signing them, more about that player by far than whatever team is signing them. I think you can't take that lightly. I think good players hit free agency for certain reasons. We're going to talk about a few where their teams just don't have the money. But I think usually building a team is through the draft, re-signing your own guys through trades. In free agency is very supplemental. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that as well.
No, I actually agree with that. I don't know that I've given much thought to it, but it all makes sense. I mean, you're thinking these guys that they've played for these teams at least 4 years, 3 4 years, and then that team is saying, hey, we've spent 4 years with this guy, and we don't think he's worth what he's asking, so we're gonna let him go. And then another team to come in and say, oh yeah, you're worth that. Come on over. Seems a little silly. Now there, like you said, there's different situations. Like I feel like the easiest one to point out, and just because he's on my board, but Christian Wilkins. I mean,
Oh yeah.
Dolphins. They can't spend. They just
Mm-hmm.
can't. So is it insane what he's asking? Could be, but also it's one of those scenarios I think you mentioned where it's like it may not be the situation where they're not saying he's not worth it. They're just saying we fucked up. We
We
don't have
can't
that
pay him.
money.
Yeah, we do not have the
Exactly.
money. I think it's the
Yeah.
same in a couple instances for these guys that we'll talk about. But yeah, paying big money to free agents to me is always a little bit you're walking on eggshells, but I do think you can get some good players and again fill some holes in your roster. But the goal should always be to draft well and re-sign your own guys. So I've highlighted a couple Colts that I think have to be back. One of them is Kenny Moore. I've talked with you about the slot corner position and how much I love the slot corner, and part of it
Oh
is
yeah.
because I get to watch Kenny Moore every Sunday. I think he is one of the best at the spot, and he's been here forever. He was a Patriots practice squad cut, um, a small school guy, but has made it and plays a huge role in our defense. Can come off the edge, can cover just about anybody. I really think if you lose him, the defense looks a lot worse. Um, so I think
I
he is
agree.
an easy re-sign.
Oh yeah, I had him on my Texans board, but I took him off because I was like, there's no way they're letting him walk.
If we do and he ends up a Texan, I will be unbelievably pissed. You have no idea. I do not want to play that guy
Oh,
2 times
I'll
a
be
week.
ecstatic.
Oh, of course, yeah. And the other guy maybe that you had on your board because the Texans need an interior defensive lineman is Big Grover Stewart for my
Oh yeah.
Colts. He's got to come back too. And I've got a stat, the case for Grover Stewart. In 6 games without him, because he had that PED suspension, which following the breadcrumbs, connecting the dots, the NFLPA 20 minutes after he got the suspension, tweeted an announcement about eating uh, like unqualified meat. So Grover Stewart went on vacation and ate some steak that had some type of protein or fibrous material in it that he tested positive for PEDs for and lost out on 6 games of last year. But in those 6 games without him, the Colts defense gave up 4.7 yards a carry and 153 rushing yards a game. In the 11 games with him, the yards per carry went down a full yard to 3.7, and total yards went down 50 to 107.9 rushing yards a game. So if that doesn't tell you, I mean, he's worth 50 rushing yards a game on the interior of the defensive line, and he's still playing high quality football. I think he's another guy that's a no brainer. You've got to have him back.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid one. He's definitely on my board. I mean, having to play him twice a year for the past couple of years, I mean, I've seen it firsthand. Dude's a monster. Um, I think the only guy I'd want more, honestly, from your all's team is DeForest Buckner in the same division.
Yeah.
So, which is just crazy. But yeah.
Yeah, I think he's 100% a re-sign candidate. And then I think I talked about cutting Mo Cox saves $6 million, and there's two guys on the roster I think total would combine for $6 million. And if we have to cut Mo Cox to keep Rigoberto Sanchez, our longtime punter, one of the best statistical punters, is he another guy on
Yes.
your board?
No, I just
Okay, I was
love
about to
that
say.
guy.
Yeah. If you can keep Rigo on the team, I mean, longtime Colt beat cancer while on the Colts, and then came back and continued to produce. Um, and then also Tyquan Lewis, who's become kind of a rotational defensive lineman for us, has some injury history, but when he is on the field and rotating in, seems to be extremely disruptive. Um, and again, I think those two combined cost around $6 million. Um, in terms of cap hits. So I think those two are necessities as well, and those are my two final re-signings. I'll talk about somebody that I didn't re-sign, but first I want to hear who you're bringing back to the Texans.
So I'm gonna be honest. I love a lot of our guys that we're leaving. However, I think there's great talent in free agency at the spots that we need, and some of these guys are at spots that we don't need so much. So the guys that I do really want to sign, I'm gonna first go out with my first outlier. He's gonna be super cheap, and that's why I hope we re-sign him. Myjai Sanders. I don't know if you remember him. Cardinals drafted him, and then they cut him, and he
Mm-hmm.
looked like a failure. And then D'Amico brought him in, and he was just a rotational guy. He's nothing crazy. He's not like the next Myles Garrett or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But he is a solid mix in, give a guy a break, give Will Anderson a breath or two, a play or two, and you're not going to lose that much from the switch. He's going to be able to play 2-3 plays in succession at a high rate, give Will Anderson a breath, let Will Anderson come back in and do well, and I think he showed me last year why I'm a die-hard Myjai fan right now as a rotational role in our defensive end. And Lord knows we need it because we lost quite a few guys on that
Yep.
D-line to free agency. Another guy, we just signed Kaimi Fairbairn. So
Yep.
which feel about that deal? A little bit rich,
That's
but okay.
both of us now are paying kickers. We got Matt Gay, biggest kicker
It's
contract in
insane.
history. I
Yeah,
did watch
but
Jaime Fairbairn in Week 18 shank a field goal that made it a 6 point game instead of a 7 point game. So
yeah,
nothing came of
it
it, but
almost cost us the
yeah,
game. But
nothing came of it. But
it's cool. We also signed Dalton Schultz back, who also almost cost us 3 different games at the run for
oh
the
no, I know how you are
playoffs.
about Dalton Schultz. You were. I followed you on Twitter and I saw that. It just kept popping up.
Oh
I
man!
kept getting Texans posts, and I was
Oh,
like, "Why is this?" And I'd scroll down a little bit, and I saw you in the replies, and I was like, "Oh, there it is."
I was fighting that one. That one's annoying. Anyway, but to add on to yours too, we have a punter as well, Cam Johnston. I know you saw him week 18 as
Yep.
well,
Oh yeah.
and he played his butt off,
Oh yeah.
pinning y'all
Through
multiple
darts.
times in the 10. He is by far one of my top punters. I hope we sign him. And then I've got Singletary. I'm a huge Dameon Pierce fan. I still have faith in Dameon Pierce, but you can't say Singletary didn't produce.
Yeah.
Dude ripped off huge games down the stretch. I wouldn't mind bringing him back. Current estimations have him at 4.5 APY. That really lays into it. If he wants more than $5 million a year, I'm not for it. I think there are plenty of guys out there that I would rather have for that kind of money. But if he sticks around 4 million, 5 million, I'm cool re-signing him for a year or two. Give someone for Pierce to learn, and we'll get through there. And then I really want to sign back Noah Brown as well. We need wide receiver depth. We don't have depth. We don't need the stars. We don't need the T. Higgins. We don't need the crazy Mike Evans, nothing like that. We just need depth, guys that are going to produce in their roles. Cutting Robert Woods and re-signing Noah Brown feels good. I feel like Noah Brown can do that Robert Woods role, or if we draft someone like I have for us to draft, Noah Brown is a great fill-in for Tank Dell. They have very similar skill sets, very similar production. So those would be the four guys I would re-sign out of the eight that we're losing that are real big deals. We're losing obviously Tier Tart. I love Tier Tart. We got him from the Titans. I
Oh
wanted
yeah,
to keep him, but he's probably going to ask for too much. Steven Nelson, we're going to let go. I hope. I love the guy. He's a baller, but it's yet again a situation of I think he's going to ask for 8-9 million, and I'm just not willing to pay him that much at 31 with one good year last year. Um, Another guy we're letting go is Barnett. I really want him back. Derek Barnett did pretty well in a
that
rotational
was a
center
late signing,
rotation.
wasn't it?
Yep,
That's what I thought.
him
Yeah,
and
later in the year.
MyJ were like middle of the season,
Yeah,
late season, but they came in clutch down the road, and I really
yeah,
liked them. I
Barnett.
thought it was stupid to pick them up, but listen, they proved me wrong.
Yeah,
And then Sheldon Rankins, I'm okay letting go. I'm not too worried about that. I think a couple of these free agents I want a little more expensive, but I think better bang for the buck.
yeah, yeah. So who? One name you didn't mention at all, I noticed, was Jonathan Grenard.
Yep, that's a spicy take.
What's the situation for him in your mind?
Yeah, he's one of those guys. Listen, I every report out there says he's a great locker room guy, and I'm here for it. Like, love the guy, cool. He has had 2 years of decent production. Last year was his best year production wise, and that was because he had Will Anderson Jr. on the opposite end.
Yeah,
When I look at guys, I look at them how they play. And for me, I saw 3 years of Jonathan Grenard get injured, lack of production. He was sure our best guy on our defensive line, but that's not saying anything when our defensive line had 0 people on it. So for me, like, you put him out there on an island, and he's average, nothing crazy. He's average. Where this last year he was good, pretty good, honestly. Did very good for the games he played and stuff like that. He had an injury, took him out a couple weeks, not that big a deal. But he was good. But it was because he had a great supporting cast.
mm-hmm.
And listen, we still have that supporting cast, so there's an argument to be made. But I mean, it's reported he's going to be asking for 22-23 million a year, and I don't see it. I don't see the worth in it. I don't see why we would pay a guy who couldn't produce on his own money that we could pay on a guy that can produce on his own. So it's probably one of my spiciest takes that I'm not interested in seeing him come back at that high price. If he wants to take a team friendly 15 mil a year or something low, cool. I'd be great with it. He is good enough that I want him back, but he's not good enough that I want him back at premier numbers.
Well, if that money, that APY, if it is 22, 23, and you can, I know you're about to talk about him, and you can apply that and just cover the contract of Christian Wilkins, I'm sure you would
Yeah.
much rather do that.
And that's exactly what I have happening too.
Yeah,
I love Wilkins. I love the defensive tackles. I think investing in defensive tackles is a better strategy, building inside out. And I like Christian Wilkins far more than Jonathan Grenard. And it might bite us in the ass because, like you said, we don't know him as well as the Dolphins do. But I think, kind of like we said earlier, I think Wilkins is a victim of they don't have enough money.
no,
Now they
yeah,
don't want to re-sign him.
yeah. They're certainly entering cap hell.
Yeah.
Kind of shades of the early Saints, the current day Saints, where it's like
Yeah.
just keep pushing the money, let a couple of good players walk at a time. Um,
Yep.
what are you going to do with Tua now? There's a lot of questions in Miami that is scary, and people kind of assumed maybe that like the Bills would fall off. I don't. They've got Josh Allen. I think they're going to be there for a while. I think
Oh yeah.
the Jets' defense is ridiculous. I think that division's going to be tough for them even next year. So, um, yeah, I don't. The Dolphins' outlook to me is pretty bleak, and I think Christian Wilkins is a casualty of that. I think he'd be a huge pickup. Um, I don't necessarily want it to happen, but that is a guy you said who can produce on his own up the middle,
Yep.
pass rush, run stopping. He's just a great player, and I think he certainly fits what you are looking for. Is that the one like big splash? If you could have your pick, that's the one you'd want.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's a couple I want, so I'll go down the guys I kind of want from free agency. So I see our needs. Cornerback is our biggest need, and then edge and interior line. And then I have defensive tackle, outside linebacker, safety, halfback depth, and wide receiver slot in depth. So for me, going down the list, I think re-sign Singletary for that 4.5 or 4 if we can get him friendly. Noah Brown, re-sign him for that 3.5. That's a 7.5 cap total. Helps with our running back depth, wide receiver depth. And then we go defensive side of the ball, which is where we need the most help. That's where I want to spend all our money. I think Stroud showed he can do it with what we have. We've already signed Dalton Schultz. I don't think we need to spend any more huge money on the offensive side. The one I love, like we're talking about, Christian Wilkins at that 22 a year. I would love to sign him, even if it's a little bit higher. I think he is well worth it. Other defensive tackles I like. So obviously we talk about Grover Stewart. I think he's a baller. If we can't get Christian Wilkins, I hope we go all in on Grover Stewart. I know he's older, but even just a 2-3 year deal, I think he still's got it. I wouldn't be sad about it. But two guys that would be middle to lower end that I would like if we can't get that splash guy at defensive tackle would be Javon Kinlaw and Tier Tart.
Mm-hmm.
I love Kinlaw. I think he is a baller. I've already kind of talked about Tart. He's wanting probably around 10. I wouldn't love to pay him that, but if we can't get Wilkins, we need someone depth there. Cool, I'd be okay with it. But really, Javon Kinlaw looks like he's going to be cheaper, probably around that 6-7.
Yep.
And so if we can't get Wilkins, or even we want to get Wilkins and Kinlaw, really wouldn't be that much more, that much crazier. And that would put us right around that 30 mil in defensive tackle, give us two quality, one that's going to kill it, the other one that's going to be a great supporting defensive tackle, just to pair with already having Khalil Davis, Malik Collins, Kurt Heinisch. I think that would really set up that. Like you were asking, so this is kind of my answer. For edge, if we don't plan on drafting edge and we have the money, I would love to bring in Chase Young.
Okay.
He's probably my second biggest guy in free agency, money wise. I would want. I think he brings a level to the game that a lot of edges can't. I have him over re-signing Jonathan Grenard. I think he's going to ask for less. I think there's a market on him, mainly because of the rumors that have been going around about him giving up on snaps, and Washington was willing to trade him away, and then 49ers aren't willing to re-sign him. What's going on with him? What is it with him? I still have faith in him. I think he's coming off some major injuries. He needs some time. I think we sign him to a 15 a year. I would be more than happy with that. That's a super cheap deal for an edge that has, crazy potential. And then my favorites really are Devin White. He's my favorite defensive player ever. I mean, he just is. I don't know why. It's just every time I have watched football, I love Devin White. He is a crazy good player. He's had some pretty good whiffs the past couple of years, and a lot of people are hating on him for it, so we could get him cheap, 7 a year. It looks like another big one I like outside linebacker would be Van Ginkel.
Andrew Van Ginkel, yeah, Dolphins.
Yeah, he's a baller. I mean, he had to step up with Jalen Phillips out, and he did.
Yep.
And the nice thing about him, same thing with Devin White, is he's had a lack of production lately because he only got to start those last few games. And so he's still pretty cheap. I think you get Devin White and Van Ginkel for around 15 total. And then my other additions would be on the cornerbacks, which would be I really want Ronald Darby and Sean Murphy-Bunting. I think combined, Darby's looking at like a 3 APY. Sean Murphy-Bunting's looking around a 5. I think you can get those guys for about 8 or 9 million. That'll solidify, give a solid rotational set, make sure Derek Stingley isn't doing it all himself, give him some help, and give him some depth. So basically that would all lead out with those numbers. That would leave us $5.5 million after all of those signings, and we would fill almost all of our holes. We'd like to get a safety, but obviously that probably won't happen. But then kind of I've been trying to estimate what we'll get in the draft, and I just kind of estimated in there drafting Latu, and then drafting Peyton Wilson and Luke McCaffrey. So Latu help with that edge, so that way we can spend the money on defensive tackle and not edge. Peyton Wilson shores up the inside linebacker, gives us a long-term guy in case Devin White is a bust. And then getting Luke McCaffrey in the third, I think you aren't going to be able to wait any longer on him if he's even there in the third. And obviously I'm a McCaffrey guy. Christian was my boy,
Yep.
and I believe in Luke, but also I think Luke's willing to do the dirty work. He's willing to play that blocking role, that slot role, run the inside routes underneath, everything he has to let Tank Dell blow it up and let Nico Collins be that possession receiver, and I think he really complements our offense pretty well. So all of that's the first 3 picks in the draft. All the free agent leave us with $5.5 million. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, focusing all defense is pretty much exactly what I did. I actually don't have one offensive player written down for my Colts free agent targets. Um, Interesting because a guy that's drawn a lot of attention to possibly wanting to play in Houston at the running back position is Saquon Barkley.
Yep.
You don't have him written down. I'm wondering why that may be.
So I have him on here. My biggest hangup, like with a lot of them, is the money.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have $53 million now after Schultz and Fairbairn. We have $53 million. Nick Casero's already pointed at, I'm not spending it all. So I think no matter what, we're going to have some left over. I don't think he's going all in, balls to the wall, spending $30 million on 3 different people, whatever. So my thing is, I love Saquon. I'm here for Saquon coming in. And if Saquon wants to come in on a friendly deal, I'm all for it. What he's asking for is 12. I'm not interested in a 12 APY for a 27-year-old running back.
Yeah.
I would be interested in a 9 or an 8, not a 12. But that's kind of where I would say is, obviously, if he comes in and says, hey, I'm willing to take 9 a year for 2-3 years, cool. We're letting Singletary walk and we'll take Saquon. And I'd be happy with that. I mean, take the 4.5, 5 we were going to do to Singletary, use up the left of what we're remaining, or try and get some more friendly deals on there. Bring him in. I think it would be dynamic. I think it would be fantastic. I'm just not willing to pay 12 a year to a 27-year-old running back with an injury history.
Yeah.
I think it's fair. I think it's pretty reasonable with Jonathan Taylor, like you all did, but I don't think that's reasonable at all for a Saquon, especially if he's going to be seeking us out. Yeah, we need to use that leverage. I think that's huge for us.
I believe, and I'm going to check it as quick as possible. I believe Jonathan Taylor's cap hit is less than that 12 million mark.
Oh yeah, it is. It is. I think it's like
10 million,
11?
10.8. Yep.
Yeah.
Actually goes up next year to 15. So delayed some of that money. But Richardson on the rookie contract, as with Stroud on the rookie contract, can help heal some wounds.
It's a luxury.
Oh yeah, it absolutely is. They asked Rich Eisen and Daniel Jeremiah at the combine asked Chris Ballard about it, and he said it is a luxury. But he also believes you could build good teams with quarterbacks on the full contract, like he referenced the Kansas City Chiefs, and just said really it puts even more pressure on your front office to draft well, which I think goes without saying. But right now, the way the Colts and the Texans are, both teams have drafted well, and they have $60 million in cap space. So again, yeah, these free agent supplemental pieces, both teams with high expectations, hoping to vault them into a space where they can meet those expectations next year.
I mean, I'm not going to brag or anything, but they did just come out and say we were the biggest threat to the Kansas City Chiefs dynasty. That's all I'm saying.
Was that like Dan Graziano or something on ESPN?
I think so, yeah. It wasn't like one of the crazy ones, but it was someone notable, and I was like, you know what, I'm keeping that in my pocket.
I'm keeping it. Yeah, it's going to be there. They're forgetting Anthony Richardson. So, yeah, like I said, I went no offense with my signings. I let go of Mo Alley Cox and restructured Quentin Nelson, which the Colts don't typically do, restructuring contracts. They like to get their players paid pretty much right away. Nelson's current cap hit is close to $25 million, I believe. It's 24-ish million. And it was scary 2 years ago, at the end, about this time 2 years ago, because he had a down year. Played through injuries, did not look like he was worth the price tag. Bounced back in a big way last year, as did the entire offensive line. and that whole unit is at least on contract for next year. Don't have to pay or acquire another one, which I think is huge for us. So I'm restructuring Nelson. If he continues to be the good player that we know that he is, I have no problem pushing his money back into further years and freeing some money up this year. So that saves us an additional $12 million. Um, so according to Spotrac, with the Alley Cox cut and the Nelson restructure, we're at around 62 million.
It's a
And
nice
like I
number.
do, what
That's a nice number.
it is a good number. I'm for it. And I'll talk about some of the moves that I think we can make to get that number down, but hopefully get the talent up. Nothing on offense. I think what you needed to do on offense has already been done. You had to bring back Michael Pittman Jr. And the franchise tags the way they decided to do it. I'm of the mind that they franchise tagged him on the non-exclusive. I don't know if you saw that was part of it. So he is free to talk to other teams if he wants to, um, and the other teams can kind of tell him what he's worth, and he can go back to the Colts and kind of just create a more informed negotiation process. And if he does sign a mega deal and the Colts get two first-round picks, that's probably okay with me too. I don't think that happens,
Yeah.
especially with this wide receiver class coming in. So I think it was a good move by the Colts, smart move to let him gauge his interest on the market, see what other teams are would possibly pay him, and then come back to the Colts. I think he gets a long term deal done this offseason. I think it still happens this offseason. I think that the tag was more so he couldn't just be unrestricted talking to these other teams, um, and that after free agency, when the Colts look and see how much money do we have left, now we can really work on the structure of this long term deal with Pittman. And I think that's how
Yeah.
they're going to play it out. Um, but defensively, some signings that I think could be interesting. I think we go veteran at corner. The secondary is where we need by far the most help. We've got two guys back there now, and Juju Brents and Jalen Jones, both rookies last year. You liked what they saw when they were on the field, continuing their development. I think, as the Colts love to do, is just develop their own guys. So I think adding more youth in the draft could kind of uh, uh, mess with that a little bit. I was looking for a word. Could kind of could muddy that. I think you want to bring in a veteran presence, and I think there are a couple on the market. I highlighted both Kendall Fuller, who from the Commanders, who continues to put in kind of these under the radar, really productive years. I think he was by PFF the sixth best cover corner in the league last year, but nobody talks about him because he's on the Washington Commanders. Um,
Yep.
Not a big name on a bad team, but somebody who is productive. And Spotrac has him estimated at around 14 million a year. I think that's a move that they could look into. Somebody who can play on the outside, help develop the young guys while still giving us kind of a true CB1 that can. We're not expecting to kind of have these hit or miss games at both cornerback spots. I think you're asking for trouble if you're doing that. So him
Yeah.
or recently cut Jacksonville Jaguar Darius Williams, who they brought in a man coverage guy. I forgetting his name, the guy from Atlanta, I believe, who is man coverage, pin the ears back, send the blitz, and Darius Williams is very much a zone cover corner. And Gus Bradley runs the cover two zone at the highest rate of anybody in the league. It's his favorite shit in the world, just to drop back into coverage and send four. So Darius Williams, he is older. I think he's almost 32 years old. But we see him twice a year. Solid player coming off a good year, good in zone coverage, estimated around 12 to 13 million a year, according to Spotrac. So I think corner, we need to go veteran. I'm going to talk about another corner as a trade target. You can guess as to who that may be. Um, but those two in free agency, I think, would be big signings. I also have highlighted Xavier McKinney from the Giants, who just recently got cut. I think another victim of a team that doesn't have money because they decided to give Daniel Jones $1 billion. Um,
Yeah, he's a baller.
he's a good player, and I think that he is this. Chris Ballard, all he talks about is explosiveness on both sides of the ball, and McKinney is about as explosive as it gets at the safety position. And he would be taking the place of Julian Blackman, who in this um, kind of fake offseason I've let walk. I said I was going to let a player walk earlier. Blackman is a good player. I think he's fits in the scheme. I enjoy watching Julian Blackmon. He's now in his first 4 years had two season-ending injuries, which I think is a big thing for the Colts. It should be a big thing for any team when a guy is, the best ability is availability. And Blackmon,
Yeah.
while he is good, has missed significant time. I think it's stunted his growth a little bit. And I think Xavier McKinney at around that $12 million a year mark, which could be inflated. I think that the money estimations right now are really difficult because every team just got handed $30 million extra dollars to spend. So what
Yep.
these contract numbers look like for certain positions, I'm not entirely sure. We could see. I mean, Mike Evans just got $26 million a year at wide receiver, and maybe that it could be dialed back, but that was the initial report. It was 26 million. So these non-premium positions like safety could be getting paid more as well. That $30 million, I would assume creates some sort of inflation, and these player agents know that, and they're going to be asking for more money, and you can't blame them. So, but McKinney at 11, $12 million, I'd be happy with. If it looks like a little bit more than that, that's fine. I think he is a true impact player, and if that's our big splash in the offseason, I'm very happy. Um, one more player as a signed candidate. I noticed you didn't talk to about him, and I was interested because I think this is a productive player, um, kind of a rotational piece, but when he's on the field, stands out as a true possible, edge one defender on your team, and that's Bryce Huff from the New York Jets. Um, this is a good player. I like Bryce Huff a lot, and I think that the Jets letting him walk. We've talked a lot about already how, and it's hard to justify. Well, they just don't have the money. If we say that about every player that is hitting free agency, but the Jets don't. They are tied up. Um, in Huff, they did. He was a franchise tag candidate. They elected not to franchise tag him, and it could be a situation, obviously, where they know more about him than we do. But what I see in Bryce Huff is a really good player and one that feels kind of like the Samson Ebukam signing last year that Chris Ballard made, and he came in and made an impact. I know they're kind of waiting on Kwity Paye and Dio Odengbo to take big leaps. They're both going into year four. Odenga both have had some injury histories, but I think if you're going to sign another edge rather than draft one, if you're letting these young guys continue to develop, uh, Bryce Huff is a good player, and I am curious to hear why maybe he wasn't on your list for the Texans.
So I think I agree. I like Bryce Huff. I think he gets a lot of slack on him because he was rotational, but no
Mm-hmm.
one really looks into why and the fact that their edge room was stacked.
Yeah,
Anyone coming from that New York Jets defense, you've got to understand they're not going to have crazy production because they had rotations going, and that's how they stayed as good as they are.
mm-hmm.
I love Bryce Huff. I do. I think if I didn't have Chase Young, so
Yeah,
basically my edge priority would go Chase Young, um, re-sign Jonathan Grenard for like 16 to 18,
mm-hmm.
Derek Barnett on the cheap, and then Bryce Huff at
Okay,
the 16 that he's asked, 16 to 18 that he's asking.
yeah,
Um, I would rather have Grenard over Huff just because it's the devil we know over the devil we don't. We know he can be productive with Will Anderson Jr. We know he can vibe off that. Obviously, we think Bryce Huff can, but he's been playing rotationally, so there's just some question marks. They aren't really crazy question marks. It's just that little bit of doubt that I'll take the bird in the hand over the possible two in the bush kind of a thing.
right.
But yeah, he's definitely on that list. He would be like, obviously, I don't think we're getting Chase Young. And if we don't re-sign Jonathan Grenard, he'd be probably next on my list to be like, hey, if we ain't going to sign Grenard, let's try and get Huff. I think he's a very similar athlete, very similar player, if not better.
Yeah, I think another thing on Chase Young, if anybody's going to bring out the talent in him, I think it would be D'Amico Ryans. Um,
Man, I wish. Oh, it
I
would just
think,
be nice to see an all-time speed rusher, and then Will Anderson Jr., who's a speed rusher with power. And then if we can draft a defense, I mean, if we get lucky and Murphy drops, which he's not going to, gosh, I think that would be a wet dream right there.
sure.
I don't think we need much else on the defense because we want to get more time. But no, yeah,
I also debated. You talked about Javon Kinlaw. I debated writing him down. 2020 13th overall pick. I know that know that off the top of my head because that was the pick that we traded to the San Francisco 49ers for DeForest Buckner.
I
And
didn't know that.
they took Kinlaw. Coming out of South Carolina, he was an absolute freak. Same with Chase Young out of Ohio State. Two premier athletes who seem to not quite have figured it out yet in the NFL. Um, but I think that, like I said, D'Amico Ryans as a defensive mind and as a motivator, I think if you were to take any project defenders that you know the talent is there, they just haven't put it all together. Maybe it's mental, maybe it's injuries, whatever. I think D'Amico could figure it out for him. So yeah, I like both those signings for the Texans, and that wraps up my free agent targets for the Colts.
Yeah, that'd be same for me. So looks like we're about 40. So let's go ahead and see
Well,
if there are any.
real quick, I would love to hit.
Oh yeah.
I've got two or three trade targets.
Oh, go for it. I
I don't
like
know if you have
this.
any. Um,
I don't. I don't.
I've got a couple. So I took a look. I'm all three are quarterbacks. I took a look at expiring contracts, guys that have maybe been buried in the depth chart, and guys that have rumors have been swirling about. One of them is Marshawn Lattimore from the Saints. Um,
Ooh.
would incur about a $16 million cap hit. It came out about 2 3 days ago that the vibe around the combine between front offices was that he may be for sale as the Saints are trying to kind of figure out their money situation. Um, I've always liked Marshawn Lattimore. The kind of issue with him is injury history. I think now he's missed 2 seasons, or gone out of 2 seasons. Last year being the most recent. I think he got injured in week 7 or something, got put on IR, and was never heard from again. Um, but a really talented corner, we know that. Possibly a
Oh yeah.
close to a top 6 7 corner in the league, and a good player, an established guy on the outside that I think the Colts would be interested in. Another one of my 2020 draft crushes out of Northwestern, Greg Newsome II from
Yep.
Cleveland.
That
Um,
man's a baller.
I've gotten on Cleveland Twitter somehow a little bit, and Brown's Twitter is very divided on him. Everybody's like, trade up and trade Greg Newsome to do it, and like all these different
That's
things.
crazy.
Um, so Newsome split snaps between the outside and the slot, and he's got outside size. I think he's 6'2", 200, which is exactly what Chris Ballard loves in his corners. Um, but he moved to the slot because obviously Denzel Ward is out there, and Martin Emerson was too good for them to keep off the field. And Newsome also too good to keep off the field, but Newsome a better slot player than Emerson, so they kicked Newsome inside. And I think it was about 65-35, 60-40 in terms of percentage snaps, majority in the slot and the outside. He's also due for a club option, but I think he's a trade candidate. We know the Browns can develop defensive players, so maybe
Oh yeah.
he's somebody that they would be willing to let go and rock with Ward and Emerson on the outside, who of course are both great players. But I think Newsome kind of a victim of a really talented roster, and maybe a fresh start looks good for him. And again, I've got a soft spot for him coming out of Northwestern in 2020. I absolutely loved him. Uh,
Well, not even to mention that kid's still what 23,
yeah, like
22.
23, 24. He
He's
came out super young.
he is incredibly young. So
Yeah,
yeah, I didn't know he was even being talked about being traded. That would be I think everyone would be interested in that one. Marshall Lattimore for sure too. I mean I don't care that he's 27. That man plays with a fucking grudge against
oh
people.
my God, yeah, yeah. Lattimore is and his get him out of the NFC South so he doesn't kill Mike Evans. I think that's he doesn't put a
Yeah.
knife in his sock.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. It's
they
coming.
gotta. It's protecting Mike Evans, getting him out of the South, and he can come to he can come to Indy and he can beef with Nico Collins. That's fine too. Uh,
I'm cool with that. Nico got him.
but the last one for me, and I wrote it down. I've been connecting the breadcrumbs. I've been following the breadcrumbs, and I'm pulling up a quote here. Um, so franchise tagged was L'Jarius Sneed a couple days ago, and it was made known that he could be available for trade, that the Chiefs would be willing to let him go for the right price. What that price looks like, I'm not sure. I assume it's not a first. I assume it would be as high as a second. maybe a bundle of picks in that range. Especially not 15. I don't think it would be something that high.
Yeah, that'd be a hard sell.
It would. Snead, 0 touchdowns allowed and a league low 4 yards a target in zone coverage, according to Next Gen Stats. And I talked about Gus Bradley and that cover two zone defense. Snead, obviously, statistically, one of the best zone corners in the league. 27 or 28 years old, I think. Maybe 27, getting to 28.
Yeah, I think he's 27 going 28.
So the veteran presence coming off 2 great years in Kansas City. There is something to be said about Steve Spagnuolo's defense and how Kansas City is an absolute cornerback factory. Now Trent McDuffie on his way up, looking like one of the premier corners in the league. But if he is available, and apparently he is available, and according to Destin Adams, one of my favorite guys on the Colts beat, the Colts are interested, and they have contacted Kansas City about a possible trade. It was broken yesterday that 7 teams had reached out to Kansas City. That was from the USA Today, the Colts being one of them. And then today, literally 30 minutes before we started recording, Destin Adams tweeted that the Colts are indeed interested, and according to a team source, if Snead hit free agency, he would have been our top priority at corner and free agent altogether to pursue. So
I swear to God, if y'all end up with Snead, I will be livid.
there is seems to be at least one-way interest from the Colts to Snead. He'll be about a $19 million cap hit this year. They have the money to do it, and corner's the spot to spend. If you're going to spend $14 million for Kendall Fuller, send a second and $19 million for L'Jarius Snead. In my mind,
Yeah, without question.
I think he's a fantastic player. He's one that could be defense changing, true lockdown corner. And again, I'm a little bit scared of a guy coming off a huge year in Steve Spagnuolo's defense, but at least on paper, I'm 100% all in for L'Jarius Snead in Indy next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. So I had no idea Newsome. I love Newsome. Obviously, mainly he's 22, 23, and he's already playing elite. If Snead is available, I would give up Christian Wilkins for Snead. If
Really?
that were
Yeah.
something that we could do. Like that's a player, and for me, like it's all about replacement, wins over replacement, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, take out Christian Wilkins. There's Javon Kinlaw that I love at 5. There's Tierra Tart at 9. There's Sheldon Rankins at 9. Plus, we already have 2 guys. Like, I would be perfectly happy replacing and getting a lesser defensive tackle if we can pair up Derek Stingley with L'Jarius Snead.
No,
Are you kidding me?
It's probably immediately the
that'd
best
be
cornerback
nuts.
duo in football, on paper at least.
Just absolutely be nuts. I would be all for that. So yeah, I completely understand the interest there. That's a huge big name target, Snead. Obviously I knew he was being traded. I worry about the cost because my biggest thing is how much are you really paying, because they want a second and a fourth or something. Okay, we're giving a second and a fourth just to have to re-sign this guy next year for another buku's amount of money. For 1 year, a second and a fourth in this draft, I don't know.
Right.
But if the price is right, yeah, absolutely. I would move heaven and earth for that guy.
And we know Chris Ballard loves his draft picks. He trades down, it feels like, more than anybody. Maybe that's biased because I'm watching the Colts draft process, but guy loves his draft picks. But L'Jarius Snead is a guy that, and especially if this team source is, I assume he's reliable. I love the work Destin Adams does. He's been right about multiple things now for the Colts. He was their number one priority if he hit the market. So I think that doesn't change because he's, the Chiefs are asking for a second round pick or something like that. So that would be one, like I said, absolute home run. L'Jarius Snead and Xavier McKinney, and the Colts are going to the Super Bowl. We're on the way.
God. Yeah,
I will be there. I'll be seated.
That's really where y'all need it, is that secondary. Your linebackers, your D-line, that's pretty solid. You guys just need a secondary. And you put Xavier McKinney, who's also on my board, just he's one of the higher priced ones, so he didn't get added. But Xavier McKinney and L'Jarius Snead to you guys, plus if you still get your first,
it'd be so
get
sweet.
Like a Brock Bowers.
Yeah, get a pass catcher. Yeah.
Dude, Y'all would be terrifying.
it would be
Y'all are
so much
already
fun.
the second best team in our division, so.
Whoa. Well, I think that wraps us up for our team off seasons. I'm good.
Yeah,
I've got
absolutely. Do
no
you want
more
to?
notes.
Okay. Yeah, we'll wrap it up. We'll be done, and we'll get this going on our next episode.